It is the final word. Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins. India off for their next test assignment in the Caribbean. The new World Test Championship cycle beginning as well. Australia and England already on negative points from their overage shenanigans.
Love it.
And serves them right too. I hope they both miss out on the final on that basis. I hope everybody gets points deducted for that stuff.
It might be that they all miss out on the final. It could be like the Football World Cup last year where added time, everyone had to play an extra 10 minutes because the referees all bound together and decided to adjudicate it properly.
It could be like one of those years where they don't give the award, for a Pulitzer or something, where they're like, well, nobody deserves it this year.
Like when Shilberry was editor of the Wisden Cricketers Almanac, and it was the year that Muhammad Amir would have been one of the 5, and he gave 4 instead of 5 as a consequence.
Oh. That's sort of pen empty chair level symbolism here. So they're going to Dominica, a place that you always speak of fondly.
Yes, and I'm so glad that it'll be the first test match played there since 2017. So Dominica, Windsor Park, was the ground where I commentated test cricket like a grown-up for the first time in 2015. Adam Voger's 100 on test debut, which I was very fortunate to be behind the mic for. It was my first tour, right? Like you and I had done stuff at home, and I'd obviously been to a lot of test cricket before, but actually going there as a member of the accredited press and in turn getting the chance to commentate that week in Dominica, very special. I'll never forget crossing the island. It's about an hour drive from where you land to where you are, and leaving my hat accidentally at the airport. And when I arrived to fly out from Dominica after the test match, the guy from security said, "Oh, you left this here a week ago." It's that kind of place. Lovely people. The open air nightclub where Chris Rogers was announced to the ring. Chris Rogers! And Bucky's like giving it big ones on the dance floor. And Mitchell Marsh, when he was a member of the squad but not a member of the team, I'm pretty sure, just dancing around in the open air nightclub on his own. No one knew, well, rather people know who he was, but he didn't give a fuck. He was just doing his thing. Great memories from there. But very tragically, there was a horrific hurricane that went through that part of the Windward and Leeward Islands in 2017, September 2017. 280 kilometres per hour winds, a huge death toll around there in other parts of the Caribbean that saw 3,000 people lose their lives. It damaged 98% of buildings in Rossau, the capital of Dominica, including the ground, which is right on the edge of the city. Like you kind of go up the hill and it's a beautiful place. But yeah, this is the first test match, and they've managed to get Dominica into a position where it can host international cricket again. And India are going to be there. The last time India were there, it was Virat Kohli's first test tour back in 2011.
Wow.
So a bit of a full circle there. But I'm just chuffed that they were able to play a test match there. And personally, I cannot wait to get back to Dominica at some stage. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, good luck to them. And I'm sure the rebuilding and reconstruction is still going. And it's good to know that there's a place that if Lou Bega ever left his hat behind at the airport, it would be safe. You wouldn't want him to be knocking around his adopted part of the world without his hat, the Hat Man. Now, interesting times for the Indian team. They're doing a slow transition, so Pujara's gone.
Shame.
Yashavi Jaiswal will come in and bat at 3. Ruturaj Gaikwad's in the squad, but probably not in the 11 initially, but you never know. You're only ever a rolled ankle away or a whim, a selectorial whim. So Shubman Gill as well. They're between the 3 of them, they're the new blood, the sort of the next lot in. Shreyas Iyer is still recovering from injury, presumably. And there's the old guard with Rohit Sharma, with Virat Kohli and Ajinkya Rahane, who's back as vice captain. So that's interesting that they've got sort of a bit of new that they haven't gone. They're easy on the transition. Only one of the old guard moving out.
I'd imagine at Dominica, which is a ground where Michael Clarke has a test fifer, they'd be inclined to play both spinners. Jadeja and Ashwin are both in the squad. And Ashwin's record in the Caribbean is absurd. He's got, 3 centuries batting in the Windies from memory?
Something like he's got 5 total, 4 against the Windies.
I think 3 of them might have been there.
In the Caribbean.
Just got to feel about that. So, but they still, they still feel that Rishabh Pant, don't they? Because even if Ashwin bats 6, that's obviously where Rishabh was batting before his accident.
Or if Jadeja bats 6.
Jadeja, that's right. But I still, when I'm thinking about the Indian Test team, I'm still thinking about Rishabh most of the time, and they've got to make do with what they've got. And I understand that KS Bharat's a fine gloveman, but he's never going to be able to bring to Test cricket what Rishabh Pant was before.
No, I mean nobody could and nobody did. Like Rishabh's just on his own in terms of the strength of effect that he could have on a Test match. He really is sort of in the Gilchrist calibre in terms of just how much of an influence he could have as a wicketkeeper with the bat. And he just hasn't had the length of career to rack up as many hundreds. But I mean, God, I hope he's able to come back fully after that injury, but I wouldn't necessarily expect that he can.
And if he can't, I think Ishant's going to end up being the keeper, right?
Yeah, well, so he's in the squad. So again, it's like it was with the World Test Championship final. Do you have KS Bharat as your proper keeper who's not as good with the bat? Do you have Ishant Kishan as your more aggressive wicket keeper?
Harsha's view, and I take, when he watches a lot of this stuff as close as we do, right? His view is that you have to pick KS Bharat at the moment. Ishant Kishan's keeping isn't there, isn't at the point where it would supersede the importance of a top quality wicket keeper. But I mean, keepers can improve, right? Keepers can go from being batters who keep a bit to being frontline keepers. It's not like you don't necessarily stay at the same standard forever. So
exactly.
That's of interest.
That. So the bowling is interesting as well because Mohammad Shami's being rested, so they've got Mohammad Siraj as the attack leader, effectively not hugely experienced attack leader. Navdeep Saini is back, who played a role in that Australian win. Jadev Unadkat might get a go. He's been around at about the squad, as the veteran bowler who hasn't played in a decade and hasn't been able to break back through.
Got back for one test in
he got one,
Yeah, but it was like a decade between drinks kind of thing.
Yeah, but hasn't been able to win a spot, so this might be his best opportunity to do that. Shardul Thakur is in there, and there's always an Indian smoky. I love this about Indian squads. So Mukesh Kumar is the bolter, 29 years of age, right arm, little outswingers, not super quick, but very accurate. 149 first class wickets at 21, decent numbers. But hasn't played a huge amount of. I think he's played under 40 first class matches at 29 years of age. So there's always a kind of somebody from nowhere who might just play a role, I suppose, in Mukesh Kumar.
As for the Windies, I mean, their home record's been okay. Remembering they beat England last year, they've won series. They've had one series loss, so they're the last 5 at home, haven't they? Something like that.
That
so
sounds right.
They've been putting together a body of work before they came to Australia last year and got absolutely pantsed. They were trending in the right direction. I hope that series was an outlier. I fear that it wasn't. I fear that India will beat them heavily, but we'll tell, I suppose, with Brathwaite, who's a strong captain who we can all have an enormous amount of appreciation for. What is it before Chanderpaul came along that the last 12 Test centuries opening were Craig Brathwaite for the Windies. So he'll have Jermaine Blackwood as his vice captain, as he did in Australia last year. Chanderpaul will be there. The old firm of Jason Holder. Alzari Joseph, Kemar Roach. I mean, very familiar names. It's just about whether they can, at home, really put any pressure on India, any sort of airspeed pressure on. I just don't see it.
Well, they might be able to do it via one man because Shannon, open inverted commas, Peter, close inverted commas, Gabriel.
Shannon Gabriel's back.
I believe so.
I missed this entirely.
Yeah.
That's very exciting.
Big Shannon.
Okay.
Big Shannon. I'm Shannon Gabriel. He's back.
I was told that there was just no way he'd get back to play multi-day cricket. That is great news.
He's in the squad, and if you want airspeed, he's your man as long as he can stay fit.
I remember when he hit at Dominica, Josh Hazlewood in the helmet at real pace, and Hazlewood shook it off, made about 30 not out, and got Voges to that aforementioned 100 on debut. So that's good news. They've also got in the squad a Dominican local, Alec Athanzani. I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly, and you have a crack at it. Athanase. Alec Athanase. Now he's from Dominica, left-handed, young. Made the Windies' quickest 50 on one-day debut earlier this year, and there's big raps on this kid. So I hope he gets the chance to add a Test debut to his one-day debut, which was so successful earlier this year.
And then they're playing 8 white ball games after that.
So 2 Tests and 8 white ball games, standard fare.
We'll all be glued to each of those, I'm sure. Afghanistan beat Bangladesh in their one-day series. So, and ructions issuing from that. Now, this is an amazing story from Mohammad Isam.
One of the best journalists in the world covering the game out of Bangladesh. He's a precious resource, and I'm glad that he's still recognised as the voice of cricket in Bangladesh.
He absolutely is, and this has got to be up there with one of his best. This is truly bizarre stuff. So Tamim Iqbal, captaining, and this isn't after the series is lost. This is after the first match is lost. He's had a back injury. He says he's not sure why. They don't know what the problem is, and he says, I'm going to play the first game and figure out how bad it is, right? And then apparently the coach gets unhappy about this and says, well, you can't be trying to work out whether you're injured or not by playing, and gets angry and expresses this anger to Nazmul Hassan, who's the BCB president, right? So the board president hears about this, who basically runs everything goes through him. And he gets mad about it and thus goes straight to the press and says Tamim Iqbal shouldn't be doing this, doesn't speak to Tamim Iqbal about it. So Tamim Iqbal retires immediately from one-day international cricket. And now, and Mohamed Hassan makes the connection in his piece with George Steinbrenner, boss of the New York Yankees, and how if you've never listened to the Dollop podcast about Billy Martin, who was the Yankees manager, who I think was fired 6 times by Steinbrenner and rehired every time, because Steinbrenner would do things like this. He would just get mad and go straight to the press, and then Billy Martin would quit, and then Steinbrenner would woo him back, and then Steinbrenner would fire him, and then so it's like this, right? So Tamim says, "I'm out. I'm done with this. I'm done with this bullshit. I don't want to captain this side anyway." And then Mashrafe Mortaza, the former captain, who's got no official position with the BCB, goes and gets Tamim Iqbal and takes him to the Prime Minister's house. So Sheikh Hasina, she's the Bangladesh Prime Minister, and she's a massive cricket fan.
She is.
And so...
We met her in 2017.
So she receives Tamim Iqbal the next day after he's retired and convinces him to unretire with a prime ministerial intervention, at which point he comes out and says, "Okay, I'm the ODI captain again." And then the BCB president says, "All good, take 6 weeks off, get your back sorted out, and you can lead the team to the World Cup."
That is just classic Bangladesh cricket. And I'm not surprised, Tamim's a fiery customer. I again, self-referential, but it's a nice memory from both Isam and myself. We had Eid dinner at Tamim's house in Chittagong in 2017 with his family. He's a ripping fella and a fiery fella, and that's, again, as I say, thoroughly in keeping with a lot of stories that come out of Bangladesh. And
isn't that incredible?
Yeah, and the way the media cover the game, what's it, like 50 TV stations that cover Bangladesh cricket, and
just like full barracas, just jumping up and down and cheering. And
prime ministerial intervention. I'm pretty sure she was the PM who was on the field in tears when they beat Australia in Dhaka by 40 odd runs in 17. So it means a tremendous amount. Hopefully they can convert that passion into results on the field across the formats.
And how grand that Tamim Iqbal is still going. And didn't he, how long ago was it? 2012 was it, when he peeled off that 100 at Lords?
2010.
2010. And that's the last time he's played in England? It's
a shambles. White ball cricket's one thing, but that's part of the reason I wanted to make sure we put that question to Richard Gould when we interviewed him the other week, because there's, much as it is with Australia hosting Bangladesh, which in theory is meant to happen in the next WTC cycle, although, well, no, not WTC. It's is that happening in the next? I think it is. It might be in the out years in the FTP,
right?
Like in budget in budgets, right? There's the forecast and there's the projections,
the forward estimates.
In the forward estimates, I wouldn't imagine that they'll actually play Bangladesh at home, but England, no current plans.
Yeah, exactly. Having not played Zimbabwe at home in 20 years and having not played Bangladesh in, approaching 15 years now. And so you never get to see what, Mustafizur Rahman might do with the Lord's Slope, or how Shakib might go on a spinning track at Old Trafford. It is a shame, and it is an embarrassment for those boards. Anyway, that's what's going on in the Caribbean and in Bangladesh. Cricket, I think we should take one more break.
Yes.
And then we're going to talk to Cameron Ponsonby, our friend and colleague, who's in the USA.
Party in the USA.
About Major League Cricket coming up just after this.
So Cam first, followed by qualies?
I'll do the qualies into Cam.
On the way through, okay.
This is the final word. Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins. Just before we go to Cameron Ponsonby in Houston, Texas, we're going to go via Zimbabwe, where the Dutch won through to the 10-team World Cup. Now, we talked about the fact that this was a possibility on the weekly show last week. We said Scotland had to beat Zimbabwe, and then the Netherlands had to beat Scotland, and that's exactly what happened.
It's an incredible story.
Yeah.
Holland, who last year were with a similar kind of team, when all of their county players weren't able to play against England, were pantsed by England at Amstelveen. That same nucleus have managed to get the Dutch to the second stage of a 20-over World Cup, where they did have their county players, to be fair, and now reach a 50-over World Cup ahead of 3-4 member nations: Ireland, the West Indies, and Zimbabwe, the home side. And they had to do it. the hard way too by beating Scotland at the end, who were there and thereabouts. Enormous credit to everybody in Dutch cricket, and reinforces why that World Cup Super League's been so important over the last 3 years.
And I mean, looking at all of this, it's like going to the puppy farm and then someone like puts a gun to your head and says you need to kick 3 of these 4 puppies. You know, Zimbabwe played so well through the early stages of the tournament, had that one stumble at the end, and that's it. They're out. They're knocked out.
Brutal. On
net run rate, Scotland were terrific. I mean, they were so resilient. They were so calm with the way that they knocked off Zimbabwe in their run chase. They did it clinically. They kept them to a low score. I mean, they've set everything up, and all they need to do is beat the Dutch to go through to the 10-team World Cup. They don't even have to beat them. They could lose in a run chase as long as they took 44 overs or more to do it. And they still would have gone through.
Yeah, and they were kind of getting there shakily, weren't they?
Yeah.
So they were down to the tail towards the end. We were kind of tracking it on our coverage from Leeds, what was going on the scorecard.
Yeah, well, it was more that there was so much left to do. So Baz de Leede, who's been one of the Dutch stars, had already taken 5 for 52 in the first innings when they were bowling. So they needed to chase 278 in 44 overs, which is a stiff chase at the best of times. They're well behind the required rate to get there. They needed 115 from the last 13 overs of the match, and they were already 5 down at that point, and then maybe 6 down pretty soon after that. He just goes beast mode at the end. So he takes it deep. He hits 5 sixes in a couple of overs towards the end of the innings. 123 from 92 balls. Gets them there with 8 balls to spare or something like that. Heartbreak for the Scottish team. He is only the 4th player in history to take a 5 and make 100 in a one-day international.
We were saying it last year down at the Cattery, Jeff, when covering the T20 World Cup, that he might go on to become the best ever cricketer for Holland, and he'll be highly sought after in the freelance, domestic T20 market as well, because he's so good at both disciplines. That's well under pressure. He got Holland over the line in 2 really narrow chases where they were chasing about 130 odd in those qualifiers last year, which
he was important in that T20 game against South Africa when they beat them and knocked them out of the T20 World Cup.
That's right as well. So, and he's I think it's his sister's Babette de Leede, who I've followed the career of a little bit at the fair break the last 2 years. So they're a great cricketing family. His old man played and captained the Netherlands through the 80s and 90s. So he's been preparing for this, I suppose, all the way through his young life, and now making it count.
So they'll be at a 10-team World Cup in India. The fact that they've made it, Afghanistan have made it into the last 10 is remarkable. They deserve all the plaudits, and I'm sure there'll be a couple of lopsided results along the way, and people will get stuck into them and say they shouldn't be there, but just piss off preemptively.
And it's complex. And it's complex how they haven't had access to their county players. And there's been some really great pieces. Matt Roller on Cricinfo wrote the best of them about the complexity that exists for Dutch players who can't fund their lives playing for their country, which is wrong, right?
Yeah.
They've been in the World Cup Super League over the last 3 years, and yet their county deals, their modest county deals, are more lucrative than playing for their nation. That's an emblem of where the distribution of money that we were so agitated about the other week, out of that bucket of money the ICC have to split up, and a greater percentage of it going to India than ever before. Where the rubber hits the road is with a country like the Dutch, who are going to be playing in that same World Cup against India later in the year.
Yeah, and the difference in finances, like when we spoke to Richard Gould, his comparison that the ECB's total operating budget is less than that of Tottenham Hotspur, one sort of middling Premier League club, then you've got individual counties who are operating on budgets of a couple of £1 million a year sort of thing. And then out of those budgets, what they're paying one player, really modest amounts, is still way more than they can get for playing international cricket.
And some good news feels like Greg Barclay, who's the chair of the ICC, Jeff, has been kind of sort of giving out signals, and bearing in mind the ICC have their big annual meeting, I think it's next week. Yeah. I think it's next week in Dubai. So they have to go and kiss the ring with Jay Shah and all the rest of it. But if you've got this happening, it's great timing. I mean, the World Cup Super League is gone in theory, but I wonder if there's a way through whether sensible heads can come together at this meeting.
I mean, he gave a non-committal, wishy-washy sort of comment, but at least the comment existed when he said, well, what we've seen with, paraphrasing, he said, what we've seen with the qualifiers is that we need to have something. We need to have something that does that job, that lets these teams who are the next level down from the full member nations play top teams, play them regularly, and keep improving, because here is the case, here's the proof. We've seen that it's working. It's made those teams better.
And you don't want them to regress or the gap to grow when the World Cup's 14 teams next time. So it's in the financial interest of the ICC for a competitive World Cup in 2027. And
as long as every team has to play 12 games, so that there's no chance of any lucrative teams being knocked out.
Right, yes. I think they'll do it in 2 groups of 7, the way that it should have been all along, using the model from 2003.
Anyway, that's where that's at with the World Cup qualifiers. Let's go now to Houston, Texas, and final word, USA correspondent Cameron Ponsonby.
Very quick goodbye. Plug the live show again.
This is the final word. Thanks to Cam Ponsonby for jumping on the show, Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins saying farewell to you. Remember, if you want to come to the live show on the 26th, have a look in the show notes or on our socials or whatever it is for links to tickets to the live show in London.
Get in now. 26th of July. It's at the pub where Winnie and I go to the Toggles Indie Disco at the Phoenix every 4th Sunday. It's a lovely place.
And remember, if you want to sign up on Patreon first, then you can get a half-price ticket.
Do it.
In your interest.
If you were thinking about becoming a patron, and you probably got a fairly good idea how hard Jeff and I have been working this summer anyway, and you're like, I admire their work. Well, now you can, by virtue of becoming a patron, come to the show and meet Steve Finn. And Steve Finn's got massive hands.
He does. He'll place them against your own hands,
like
and
Stewie
you can
Lowe.
compare. You can compare. It's everybody's favourite thing to do with people with big hands, is put your hands against their hands and then talk about the difference in the hands.
I want to get Steve Finn and Stewie Lowe in the same room to do exactly this, hands up against each other. Hands around America.
I reckon I'd go okay against Steve and Finn.
Yeah, I reckon, no, Finney's got enormous mitts.
We'll see. I'm imagining him just grabbing my entire head and lifting me off the ground, like he's taking a light bulb out of a lamp. That's what I'm hoping.
We'll do this at the live show. We'll compare hands.
We will. That's going to be a big segment. That's about 40 minutes of the first segment of the live show.
We've got an overhead projector and everything.
Yeah,
we can show it to the audience.
Yeah, we'll trace our hands on tracing paper. This has been the final word. The weekly show. I don't know. It's just the final word. That's the one it is.
Lord's Tabs.
Lord's Taverners.
Find the Lord's Tab stuff in the show notes too. Sign up.
Bless them. Follow their fine work and keep an eye on our feeds, because there will be more coming just about every day, because we can't stop and we won't stop. We'll see you next time.